pandemic, the WHO would have the right to declare what is a pandemic. So in actual fact, in another health emergency or a viral infection, or they would have the power to declare that it is a pandemic. So they'd be able to define what a pandemic is. And we already know they've changed the definition from 2009, where pandemic involved a lot of death, whereas now it's just an infection. So it could be a flu. They declare a pandemic, and then the WHO would have the right to decide what the quarantine requirements were, and so they could, and lockdown.
In most parts of the world, due to lockdown, most of the transmission that's actually happening in many countries now is happening in the household, at family level. In some senses, transmission has been taken off the streets and pushed back into family units. Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them in a safe and dignified manner. So
they could decide, and it's a one-size-fits-all. So centralized power that would then decide that everybody had to stay home from work for 6 weeks or 6 months, who knows. And then they would also have the power to decide on the way that this infection would be diagnosed. So, and we know with the PCR tests, what trouble we've had with COVID, and that they have not been very accurate.
PCR is separate from that. It's just a process that's used to make a whole lot of something out of something. That's what
also,
it is. But it's not. It doesn't tell you that you're sick, and it doesn't tell you that the thing you ended up with really was going to hurt you or anything like that.
So they'd have the power to decide how this infection was measured, and what tests were used to measure it. And then they would also have the power to decide how the infection was prevented or treated, and what was to be used. So this would supersede the ordinary doctors, in your surgery or your clinic. You wouldn't have the power to treat your patients the way you want to and what your experience has informed. You would have to put that aside, and it would be the pen pushers at centralized government in Geneva or centralized WHO that would say, oh, well, this is what you must use, and you have to use this. And they also would get to determine what type of medicines are safe. So they would determine which medicines were developed and who would develop them. So they could decide which drug companies would get the job, and then they would decide at what point they were safe. So we've heard them say vaccines can be developed very, very quickly. We've seen them develop very quickly during COVID, and we've also seen how harmful they are, because there's more than 3.5 million reports on the World Health Organization's adverse event database related to the COVID-19 vaccines. And the WHO maintains that these new vaccines are safe. So we see that they're not really the greatest judge of what's safe and what's not, and they're planning as a norm to develop these new gene-based vaccines very, very quickly. So there's that, and then they can decide how they promote the vaccines. And promote is a very loose term, because it also involves whether things get mandated or not. So basically, they could decide, a whole range of strategies and interventions that would have an impact on our health and our ability to choose, our ability to have informed consent, because especially, they determine the information access, and also our freedoms.